At 7 o'clock a.m., rays of sunlight sliced through the tall glass windows of the Peak Tech building in downtown San Francisco, highlighting sleek furniture and minimalist decor. Employees were gradually filling the vast, open space, sipping expensive coffee, and settling into ergonomic chairs. In a secluded corner, Michael Hayes, a brilliant yet humble software engineer, tapped vigorously on his keyboard. His workspace reflected his quiet personality. Orderly, efficient, with sparse decorations except for a photograph of him and his daughter, Mia. Michael was always among the first to arrive, his drive sharpened by the excitement and promise of a project he believed could revolutionize the tech industry. Michael had spent this past year working tirelessly on NexaBridge, an AI-driven platform designed to optimize energy use in smart cities. It was elegant, scalable, and, according to early tests, groundbreaking. He was confident NexaBridge could elevate Peak Tech to unprecedented heights. Yet, despite his passion, there was a cloud over Michael's optimism. The problem wasn't technical, it was personal. He'd recently noticed subtle changes in how upper management, especially his supervisor, Henry Whitfield, viewed his work. Conversations became shorter, questions sharper, and interest waned. Michael had heard whispers that Peak Tech was steering away from ambitious projects like his in favor of short-term, quick-return products. Still, he hoped his ingenuity would prevail. By 8:30 a.m., the office buzzed with activity. Henry Whitfield arrived, commanding attention in his perfectly tailored gray suit and impeccably groomed hair. Henry was charming, charismatic, and had rapidly ascended the corporate ladder through networking, shrewdness, and a dose of ruthlessness. He was a man who wielded power comfortably and wasn't afraid to demonstrate it. As Michael prepared for his crucial presentation scheduled for later that morning, Henry approached him unexpectedly. "Morning, Michael," Henry said with an affable but distant smile, leaning against Michael's desk casually. "Got a minute?" "Of course, Henry," Michael replied, masking his unease behind professional calmness. Henry glanced around, making sure no one was too close. He lowered his voice slightly. "Look, I know you've poured your heart into NexaBridge, but there's been some reevaluation at the top." Michael's heartbeat quickened. "Reevaluation?" Henry nodded slowly. "It's complicated. The board feels that NexaBridge doesn't align with Peak Tech's immediate strategy anymore. They're focusing on rapid profitability, simpler solutions. Your project, impressive as it is, just isn't a fit." Michael felt his breath catch. He tried to remain composed, choosing his words carefully. "Henry, we've validated the concept extensively. It's ready. The energy savings alone could transform entire cities. Peak Tech would dominate the smart city sector." Henry's expression was unmoved. "I understand your passion, but decisions have been made. Official communication goes out tomorrow. I thought you deserved a heads up." Michael's jaw tightened, emotions battling beneath his stoic demeanor. "Can't we at least discuss this further with the board?" "It's final," Henry replied, his tone firm. He adjusted his cufflinks with practiced ease. "Look, consider it an opportunity to channel your genius into something more aligned with the company's immediate vision." Henry straightened up and walked away briskly, leaving Michael sitting frozen in disbelief. His project wasn't just a concept, it was part of him, a testament to his dedication and creativity. He stared at his monitor, unable to focus, the screen now blurred by the storm of emotions inside him. Word of NexaBridge's imminent closure spread quickly through the office. Some colleagues glanced sympathetically toward Michael. Others seemed indifferent, absorbed by their own deadlines and office politics. Michael felt isolated, the buzz around him muffled by his internal struggle. The day passed in a fog. By late afternoon, Michael's phone vibrated, pulling him from his stupor. It was his friend and coworker, Emma Thompson, whose desk was just across from his. "Hey," she whispered softly as he answered, sensing his mood immediately. "Let's grab some air?" Michael nodded gratefully. Moments later, they stood on the building's rooftop terrace overlooking the city. The wind was brisk, the skyline sprawling beneath them in a panorama of glass and steel. "I heard," Emma said gently. "It's awful. Henry's making a huge mistake." Michael shook his head slowly. "I thought I was contributing something meaningful here. It's hard to swallow." "You are," Emma reassured firmly. "Everyone knows NexaBridge is a game changer. Henry's decision, it's political. Probably jealousy, maybe fear that your success undermines him somehow." Michael raised an eyebrow. "You think so?" Emma hesitated briefly. "Henry's ambitious. Maybe too ambitious. Nexabridge succeeding would shift the spotlight to you, away from him. They stood silently for a moment, absorbing the city's energy below. Michael considered her words, realizing the uncomfortable truth in them. Henry Whitfield was capable of such calculations. It was personal, after all. Emma broke the silence first. You know, you've got options. Your concept. People outside Peak Tech would kill to fund something this innovative. Michael smiled faintly. I appreciate that, but without Peak Tech's resources, the obstacles seem insurmountable. Emma nudged his shoulder encouragingly. If anyone can overcome insurmountable obstacles, it's you, Mike. That evening, Michael drove home through the busy San Francisco streets, lost in thought. At home, Mia greeted him warmly, sensing her father's distress immediately. At 11, she was perceptive beyond her years. Tough day, Dad? Mia asked, her voice gentle. He nodded, forcing a smile. You could say that. Work stuff. Mia gave him an encouraging hug. You always say that hard stuff just makes you stronger, right? Michael chuckled softly. Did I say that? All the time, she laughed. Maybe you need to listen to yourself sometimes. Michael felt warmth flood through him. Mia's simple, honest perspective often provided more clarity than any complicated adult conversation. You're right, kiddo. After dinner, as Mia tackled her homework, Michael sat at his desk at home, staring at his laptop. Nexabridge glowed on the screen, the product of his painstaking work. Emma's words echoed through his mind. Could he really take his dream beyond Peak Tech? He opened a new document, titling it simply, Startup Plan. He had no idea where this new path would lead, but as he typed, outlining first steps, risks, and potential contacts, he felt something stirring within. A defiance, a determination. Henry Whitfield might have closed one door, but perhaps, Michael thought, this was his chance to build a new door, one even Peak Tech couldn't shut. He typed well into the night, his vision sharpening with each keystroke. Michael Hayes wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The next morning arrived with a cold fog draping over San Francisco, blanketing skyscrapers in a silvery veil. Michael Hayes woke earlier than usual, having barely slept. His mind spun with thoughts, possibilities, and anxieties, leaving him exhausted yet strangely energized. The sudden change in direction forced him into unfamiliar territory, igniting both fear and excitement within him. Over breakfast, Mia noticed her father's quiet concentration. She sipped orange juice, watching him thoughtfully. Dad, you look tired. Did you stay up working again? He smiled gently, stirring his coffee. Just planning, trying to figure out a few things. About work? Mia tilted her head inquisitively. Sort of. More like figuring out my next move. You'll be okay, she reassured him with an innocent confidence that touched his heart. You're always good at figuring things out. Michael reached over, tousling her hair affectionately. Thanks, sweetheart. I'll try to remember that. The commute to Peak Tech felt different today, charged with uncertainty. As he entered the office, colleagues glanced his way, some offering quiet nods, others quickly averting their gazes. News of Nexabridge's cancellation was now officially confirmed via an impersonal company-wide email sent early that morning. The project he'd poured his soul into was now reduced to a bullet point on a corporate memo, listed as strategic realignment. Michael swallowed his pride, maintaining composure, and began quietly gathering his personal files and project documents, ensuring that all intellectual property and key insights he'd gained were securely archived. He knew the importance of this step. If Nexabridge had a future elsewhere, preserving the meticulous details he'd developed would be critical. Just after 10 o'clock, Emma Thompson approached his desk cautiously. Her face reflected genuine concern and empathy. You doing all right? She asked softly, pulling a chair closer to sit down beside him. Michael nodded, managing a faint smile. Honestly, still processing, but I started working on something new last night. Emma's eyes lit up. Seriously? Like, your own thing? Michael lowered his voice, leaning slightly towards her. Exactly. I can't let Nexabridge disappear into some corporate vault, Emma. It's too valuable. If Peak Tech won't see it through, maybe I have to. Emma hesitated, then leaned even closer, dropping her voice to a whisper. Listen, there's talk going around. People are surprised Nexabridge was shelved. Some are starting to wonder if Henry had personal reasons to stop it. Michael's heart quickened, his suspicion validated by her words. Really? Emma nodded solemnly. I overheard Henry and the CTO yesterday. Henry was emphasizing the risk, but it sounded forced, as if he was trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. Michael sat back, absorbing this information. He's threatened, he murmured, piecing together the puzzle. It looks that way. Your project got a lot of attention internally. Maybe too much for Henry's liking. Michael felt a strange mix of frustration and vindication. I never thought innovation would make me enemies here. Emma sighed sympathetically. Sometimes talent intimidates people who only thrive by controlling the narrative. Henry probably saw Nexabridge as something he couldn't control. They both fell silent, letting the implications of that thought sink in. Finally, Emma spoke again, with quiet urgency. Michael, if you really plan to pursue this yourself, be careful. Peak Tech, and Henry in particular, won't make it easy. Non-compete clauses, intellectual property claims, you know the drill. Michael nodded slowly, aware of the potential battles ahead. I've thought about it, but I believe in Nexabridge. I have to try. Emma smiled warmly. If you need help, I'm here, and I bet others would support you too. Quietly, of course. Michael felt grateful, comforted by the solidarity and genuine friendship Emma offered. It was a bright spot in an otherwise cloudy situation. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Michael systematically prepared his departure, planning his resignation letter carefully, choosing words that reflected dignity and professionalism rather than anger or bitterness. By lunchtime, he'd finalized his decision. He would leave Peak Tech today, avoiding a prolonged, painful goodbye. As Michael walked down the hall towards Henry Whitfield's office, determination fueled his steps. Henry's door was partially open, the man inside seemingly engrossed in documents. Michael knocked lightly. Henry looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before quickly settling into practiced calmness. Michael, come in. How can I help you? Michael closed the door behind him, approaching Henry's desk, his resignation letter gripped firmly in his hand. Without ceremony, he placed it directly in front of Henry. I'm resigning, effective immediately. Henry paused, stunned briefly before regaining composure, glancing down at the document dismissively. Are you sure you want to do this? You know it's a competitive market out there. Peak Tech offered you stability, growth opportunities. Nexabridge was a setback, but... Michael interrupted gently yet firmly. It wasn't a setback. It was an opportunity you threw away for your own reasons. Henry's eyes narrowed slightly. Be careful, Michael. Accusations like that are dangerous. I'm not here to accuse anyone, Michael responded calmly. But we both know why Nexabridge was cancelled. It had nothing to do with market strategy and everything to do with your personal insecurities. Henry stiffened visibly, masking his discomfort with a forced smile. If that's your belief, I can't change it. But remember, Michael, intellectual property is serious. Any attempt to pursue Nexabridge independently would lead to complications you may not wish to face. Michael held Henry's gaze steadily. I'm fully aware of my contractual obligations and the law. I created Nexabridge from scratch, and I know exactly where Peak Tech's rights end. Henry's expression darkened slightly, but he maintained his composure, realizing intimidation wouldn't work. I admire your confidence, misguided though it might be. Michael didn't flinch. Goodbye, Henry. As he walked out of Henry's office, Michael felt a profound sense of relief mixed with uncertainty. Word of his resignation spread quickly, hushed conversations erupting around the office as he cleared his desk quietly. By mid-afternoon, he left the building carrying a cardboard box filled with his personal belongings. Emma accompanied him to the exit, offering quiet reassurance as they stood briefly in the cool air. Michael, you did the right thing, she said softly. You're destined for something bigger than Peak Tech. I hope you're right, Michael sighed, smiling faintly. Right now it feels more terrifying than exciting. It's both, Emma assured him. But you'll handle it. Just promise you'll keep me updated? Michael smiled warmly, nodding. You'll be the first to know. Driving home, the cityscape passed by, blurred by the weight of what he'd done. He was officially on his own, an entrepreneur without investors, without a clear path, only an idea powerful enough to stake his future on. That evening, as he tucked Mia into bed, she smiled sleepily up at him, sensing his mixed emotions. Dad, did you figure it out? Michael gently squeezed her hand, finding strength in her innocent faith. Not yet, sweetheart. But I took the first big step. She smiled contentedly, eyes fluttering closed. Good job. Sitting alone later, Michael stared at his computer screen, now a gateway to his new reality. He registered a domain name, nexabridge.ai, symbolically marking his commitment. The next chapter of his life had begun, uncertain and thrilling, filled with challenges he could scarcely imagine. But Michael Hayes was ready. Michael spent the following days immersed in a new reality, the quietness of his home office contrasting sharply with PeakTech's bustling environment. The enormity of his decision had finally sunk in. There was no turning back now. He had fully committed himself to Nexabridge. Excitement mixed with anxiety became his new normal, propelling him forward despite the uncertainty of his future. Early mornings were now dedicated to intense research, outlining his business strategy and meticulously reviewing every detail of his work. The afternoons were filled with calls to potential investors, industry contacts, and mentors he'd accumulated over years of networking. Though Michael had always considered himself reserved, necessity was quickly pushing him out of his comfort zone. Every new call, every conversation brought fresh challenges, but also the exhilaration of autonomy and possibility. Yet, one aspect of his journey remained daunting: the financial hurdle. Michael had managed to save enough to keep the lights on for a few months, but launching Nexabridge on a larger scale required significant investment. He knew he would need substantial backing, particularly since PeakTech's shadow still loomed large, casting uncertainty over the legitimacy of his venture. One crisp Monday morning, Michael reached out to a former mentor, Robert Daniels, a respected figure in Silicon Valley known for his straight talk and no-nonsense business acumen. Robert had successfully exited multiple startups and had mentored Michael early in his career. Securing Robert's support would not only validate his idea, but potentially open doors to investment. "Michael!" Robert's gravelly voice boomed through the phone, hearty and reassuring. "Long time no talk. What's this I hear about you striking out on your own?" Michael smiled to himself, comforted by Robert's familiar directness. "Yeah, Robert. It's been quite a ride lately. PeakTech wasn't ready for Nexabridge, so I've decided to take it forward myself." Robert paused thoughtfully, then chuckled. "Typical corporate short-sightedness. I always warned you. Big companies often bury innovation under bureaucracy. What's the next step for Nexabridge?" Michael took a deep breath, preparing his pitch carefully. "The tech is ready, Robert. I need to secure funding and industry backing. With the right support, Nexabridge could redefine how cities manage energy, potentially billions in savings globally." Robert whistled appreciatively. "Bold claim, Michael. But knowing your track record, it's not empty talk. Tell you what, send me the full proposal. I'll review it, then set up a meeting with a few key investors if it checks out." Michael's pulse quickened. "Thank you, Robert. You won't regret this." "I rarely do," Robert responded warmly. "But Michael, I have to warn you. Corporate politics won't disappear just because you left PeakTech. They might still cause trouble. Watch your back." Michael took Robert's words seriously. PeakTech, and specifically Henry Whitfield, had already hinted at potential complications. The threat of intellectual property battles was a shadow he couldn't ignore. 2 days later, Michael found himself in a small but stylish cafe in Palo Alto, a frequent meeting spot for venture capitalists and entrepreneurs. Robert had set up a crucial meeting with 2 influential investors, Jessica Reed and Mark Elliott, partners at Clearview Capital, known for investing in ambitious tech startups. Jessica, sharp-eyed and meticulous, listened attentively as Michael confidently outlined Nexabridge's core concept. Mark, known for his pragmatism and blunt feedback, questioned Michael rigorously on scalability, potential partnerships, and competitors. Midway through, Mark leaned forward, eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Michael, let's talk frankly. PeakTech is a formidable giant. How do we know Nexabridge won't drown in lawsuits or IP claims?" Michael met Mark's gaze steadily. "Because the foundational algorithms and architecture predate my time at PeakTech. Nexabridge is entirely my creation. My attorney is prepared to handle any claims they might throw at us. Besides, PeakTech chose to abandon the project publicly. Legally, they've weakened their position." Jessica nodded approvingly, clearly impressed. "I like your preparedness, Michael. But beyond legality, is your technology truly ready for the market? How soon can you prove its viability?" Michael didn't hesitate. "Within 6 months. I already have a test city lined up. Everett, Washington. The city council there showed interest during earlier trials. If I secure funding, I can launch a full-scale pilot immediately. The savings would speak for themselves." Jessica exchanged a meaningful glance with Mark, a silent conversation passing between them. After a moment, she turned back, smiling warmly. "Michael, we'll need a detailed breakdown of your projected budget, milestones, and exact technical roadmap. But we're interested, very interested. The relief and excitement were palpable. Michael's dream, once nearly extinguished by corporate politics, now flickered brightly again. Yet, as Michael left the cafe, buoyed by optimism, he noticed a familiar face at the far corner table. Samuel Baker, one of PeakTech's senior engineers, deep in conversation with an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit. Michael nodded politely, and Samuel returned the gesture awkwardly, averting his eyes immediately. Michael felt a small, uneasy tug in his stomach. Was this coincidence or something else? The paranoia wasn't entirely unjustified. Corporate espionage wasn't uncommon, especially in cutthroat industries like tech innovation. Shaking off the thought for now, Michael decided to remain vigilant. Later that evening, Michael carefully documented the details requested by Clearview Capital, knowing every figure would be scrutinized heavily. Working late into the night, he meticulously crafted his proposal. Every number double-checked, every milestone clearly marked. The following morning brought another surprise. Emma Thompson called, sounding unusually anxious. "Michael, I need to talk to you," she said urgently. "Privately, in person." Concerned, Michael agreed to meet her at a small park near his house. Emma arrived swiftly, visibly shaken, clutching her phone tightly. "What's wrong?" Michael asked gently, sensing her tension. Emma exhaled slowly, looking around nervously before speaking. "Henry's aware of your investor meeting. He knows you talked to Clearview Capital." Michael felt his heart tighten. "How could he possibly know that?" Emma shook her head, frustrated. "Samuel Baker. He told Henry. He overheard your conversation at the cafe, or at least parts of it. Henry's furious, Michael. He sees it as a direct challenge." Michael absorbed the information, anger and disbelief warring within him. "What does he plan to do?" Emma hesitated, then admitted reluctantly. "Rumor is, Henry's already contacted PeakTech's legal department. They're preparing to assert IP rights aggressively." Michael clenched his fists, frustration surging. "They abandoned Nexabridge publicly. Legally, they have minimal grounds." Emma nodded sympathetically. "You're right, but legal battles are messy and expensive. They might not win outright, but they could drag this out, draining your resources and scaring investors." Michael exhaled sharply, realizing how high the stakes had suddenly risen. Henry was willing to sabotage him openly, demonstrating the true depth of his resentment. "Thanks for warning me," he finally said, determination overtaking initial shock. "I'm prepared to fight this, Emma. I won't let Henry bully me into submission again." Emma smiled supportively. "Good. Because you're not alone in this. Several people at PeakTech privately support you, and honestly, I think Henry fears exactly that." Michael stood straighter, fortified by her support. "Then let him try. He's not just up against me anymore. He's up against everyone who believes in Nexabridge." Emma's eyes sparkled defiantly. "Exactly. Keep pushing, Michael. We're behind you." That night, despite the looming threat from PeakTech, Michael felt oddly invigorated. Nexabridge wasn't merely a product. It was now symbolic of something larger: integrity, innovation, and resistance to corporate greed. The fight ahead would be fierce, but Michael was ready to stand his ground. Henry Whitfield had intended to bury Nexabridge, but instead, he had sparked a revolution, and Michael would ensure he faced the consequences. The days following Emma's unsettling revelation plunged Michael into a whirlwind of meticulous legal preparations, strategic planning, and cautious networking. Henry Whitfield's aggressive stance wasn't merely idle corporate posturing. It was a calculated move intended to cripple Nexabridge before it could even stand on its own feet. Michael understood clearly now that Henry's pride and ambition wouldn't allow him to accept defeat quietly. He had inadvertently ignited a conflict far larger and more dangerous than he initially anticipated. Michael's attorney, David Harding, a seasoned veteran in intellectual property law, became his closest advisor in these turbulent times. David had the rugged pragmatism of a seasoned courtroom battler combined with the meticulous mind of an academic. With his stern but reassuring presence, David immediately began compiling a robust defense strategy against PeakTech's looming threats. In David's spacious downtown office, the two sat poring over piles of legal documents. David adjusted his thin-framed glasses as he spoke frankly. "Michael, let's be clear. PeakTech's strategy isn't to win outright. They likely know their actual legal position is shaky. Instead, their goal will be to drown you in legal fees and tie you up for months, possibly years. It's a classic corporate intimidation tactic." Michael rubbed his temples in frustration. "So what options do we have? Nexabridge can't wait years." David tapped a thick stack of papers thoughtfully. Two routes. One, we push aggressively back at them immediately, threatening countersuits for defamation, interference, and unfair business practices. This signals we're not intimidated. It might make them reconsider dragging this out. Option 2, we try a quieter route. Negotiations, perhaps a settlement. Michael shook his head immediately. No settlements. They abandoned Nexa Bridge and hurt my reputation in the process. If we fold now, Henry wins by default. David smiled faintly, clearly appreciating Michael's determination. Then we fight. I'll draft formal responses, clearly stating our position. This might provoke a public confrontation, but sometimes sunlight is the best disinfectant. Michael felt both anxious and invigorated. Public confrontation meant media attention, potentially attracting public sympathy, but also risking unwanted scrutiny. Over the next several days, Michael balanced legal challenges with the ongoing work of building Nexa Bridge. The intense schedule took a toll, but his resolve never faltered. At night, after tucking Mia into bed, he'd return to his laptop, polishing investor proposals, refining product roadmaps, and updating the city council representatives from Everett, Washington, reassuring them of his determination to deliver. Meanwhile, whispers about Michael's conflict with Peak Tech began circulating within Silicon Valley's close-knit tech community. Influential blogs and tech news sites caught wind of the story, fueling speculation about corporate bullying and suppressed innovation. Henry Whitfield, once a behind-the-scenes manipulator, suddenly found himself reluctantly under a spotlight he couldn't control. One late evening, Michael received an unexpected call. It was Jessica Reed from Clearview Capital. "Michael," Jessica spoke calmly, with a seriousness that demanded attention. "Mark and I have been following this situation closely. Are you aware the media is picking up your story?" Michael hesitated briefly. "Yes, vaguely. I haven't spoken to reporters yet. I've been cautious about going public prematurely." Jessica paused, considering her next words carefully. "That might be changing. A journalist named Samantha Porter from Tech Insights magazine reached out to us. She's investigating Peak Tech's behavior. This could amplify your position considerably, but it also brings risks." Michael considered this carefully. "Do you think this exposure could help or hurt Nexa Bridge's credibility?" Jessica responded confidently. "With proper messaging, I believe it helps significantly, but the public narrative needs careful handling. If Peak Tech frames this as a disgruntled ex-employee issue rather than an innovation story, it could backfire." Michael understood the delicate balance he now faced. "Then maybe it's time I talk directly to Samantha Porter. I'd rather shape this narrative proactively." Jessica agreed. "Good. We'll support your stance publicly once you decide. Investors appreciate resilience, especially against big corporations. Your fight might inspire confidence rather than scare investors away." The call ended, leaving Michael with a new sense of direction. He arranged a meeting with Samantha Porter, fully aware that this conversation could define Nexa Bridge's future. They met the following afternoon at a neutral cafe downtown. Samantha, sharp-eyed and meticulous, had a reputation for unearthing truth beneath corporate spin. "Mr. Hayes," Samantha began professionally, notebook open and pen ready, "your situation has generated significant interest. Can you describe your perspective clearly? Why do you think Peak Tech, specifically Henry Whitfield, has aggressively moved against your startup?" Michael took a calming breath, carefully choosing his words. "Honestly, Samantha, Nexa Bridge represents something disruptive. Real change in how cities manage energy. Peak Tech, under Henry's guidance, prioritizes safe, short-term profits. My project threatened that status quo. More personally, Henry felt undermined by my success." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Undermined? Could you elaborate?" Michael nodded slowly. "Nexa Bridge initially received strong internal support, until it threatened Henry's influence. He thrives on control, preferring to sideline anyone whose success he can't leverage." Samantha noted this carefully, then leaned forward slightly. "Peak Tech claims intellectual property infringement. Can you counter those claims clearly?" "Absolutely," Michael answered firmly. "I developed Nexa Bridge independently before Peak Tech employed me. All core algorithms and prototypes existed beforehand. Peak Tech even explicitly abandoned the project publicly. Their claims now are intimidation tactics, pure and simple." Samantha's pen moved quickly, capturing every detail. After nearly 2 hours, she closed her notebook thoughtfully. "This story is powerful, Michael, but it will undoubtedly trigger backlash from Peak Tech. Are you prepared for this?" Michael nodded resolutely. "Completely. The truth is my defense." Nexa Bridge is too important to surrender quietly. Days later, Samantha's article exploded across tech circles, titled starkly, Silenced Innovation, How Peak Tech Tried to Bury Nexa Bridge. The piece portrayed Michael sympathetically yet objectively, showcasing Peak Tech's questionable tactics and raising pointed questions about corporate ethics and innovation suppression. Public support surged, generating discussions on major industry forums and social media platforms. Caught off guard by this scrutiny, Peak Tech responded hastily, releasing a generic corporate statement denying wrongdoing and reaffirming their right to protect intellectual property. The vague statement only heightened public suspicion, inadvertently reinforcing Michael's narrative. But Henry wasn't finished. Days later, Michael received a disturbing anonymous email, cryptically warning him to reconsider his fight. Though no explicit threats were made, the implication was chillingly clear. His continued defiance had consequences. The email unsettled Michael deeply, revealing just how personal and ruthless Henry was willing to become. That evening, sitting alone at his desk, Michael contemplated his next steps. The battle had escalated beyond business. It was now personal, dangerous, and deeply troubling. Mia noticed her father's tension immediately that evening, sensing his anxiety with instinctive empathy. "Dad?" she asked softly after dinner, sensing his mood. "Is everything going to be okay?" Michael hugged her gently, feeling profoundly protective. "It'll be tough, Mia. But yes, we'll get through it. We always do." Late that night, he revisited the anonymous threat. The fight was no longer merely about Nexa Bridge. It was about standing up against intimidation, corruption, and manipulation. Henry Whitfield wanted to break him, to extinguish his spirit along with his innovation. But Michael refused to back down. Instead, he drafted a simple public statement of defiance, posting it boldly across his professional channels. "Nexa Bridge won't be silenced. True innovation thrives despite intimidation. Together, we build a brighter future." With one click, Michael embraced the storm he had ignited. He was determined not only to survive this battle, but to win it decisively. Following Michael's bold public declaration, the momentum behind Nexa Bridge surged. His inbox exploded with messages of support, collaboration offers, and inquiries from journalists eager for further details. Michael, once reserved and understated, was now firmly at the center of Silicon Valley's spotlight, navigating new waters filled with opportunities and threats. Yet, amid the rising tide of optimism, dark clouds loomed ominously. Henry Whitfield, cornered by public scrutiny yet unwilling to retreat, doubled down on his efforts. Peak Tech's powerful legal team unleashed a calculated offensive, filing formal legal complaints alleging intellectual property theft and breach of employment contracts. Despite the flimsy nature of their claims, the aggressive litigation forced Michael into a defensive stance, draining valuable resources and consuming much of his time. Under the guidance of his attorney, David Harding, Michael responded swiftly. David fought tenaciously, skillfully maneuvering within legal frameworks to expose Peak Tech's accusations as baseless and retaliatory. Still, the mounting costs were considerable, eating into Michael's limited savings and stretching his fledgling startup's resources dangerously thin. The struggle became personal and exhausting. Michael found himself working late into each night, meticulously documenting his work history, gathering witnesses from former colleagues, and preparing extensive evidence that clearly demonstrated his independent development of Nexa Bridge. During this challenging period, Emma Thompson proved indispensable. Though still employed at Peak Tech, she quietly rallied supportive colleagues, meticulously collecting internal documents and email exchanges that could decisively refute Henry's allegations. One afternoon, Michael met Emma discreetly at a quiet cafe far from Peak Tech's headquarters. Emma looked worn but resolute, her eyes sharp despite evident exhaustion. "I've got something important," she said softly, carefully sliding a sealed folder across the table. Michael opened it, his heart quickening. Inside were printouts of internal emails, conversations between Henry Whitfield and Peak Tech executives explicitly discussing Nexa Bridge's potential threat to Henry's personal ambitions and influence. "These conversations make it clear," Emma explained, lowering her voice even further. "Henry convinced the board to kill Nexa Bridge out of fear, not strategy. The IP claims were invented afterward to justify their decisions legally." Michael flipped through the documents, emotions swelling within him. "Emma, these are explosive. How did you get them?" Emma's expression darkened slightly. "Let's just say I risked a lot. But this is proof, Michael. Henry's vendetta is personal, and Peak Tech's claims are completely fabricated. With these, you can countersue them into silence." Michael took a deep breath, understanding the gravity of what Emma had done. "Emma, this puts you at risk too. Are you sure you want to be involved at this level?" Emma smiled faintly, determination burning in her eyes. Michael, what Henry did wasn't just unethical. It was corrupt. Someone has to draw the line. If not now, when? Deeply moved, Michael nodded gratefully. Thank you, Emma. This changes everything. That evening, David Harding reviewed the documents carefully in his office, visibly impressed. Emma's bravery just handed us exactly the leverage we needed. Peak Tech will panic once they realize we have this. But we need to be strategic. Timing and method of exposure are crucial. Michael leaned back, considering his options. What do you suggest? David tapped thoughtfully on his desk. We let them escalate first. Then we respond publicly and legally. Once we file our countersuit alleging corporate sabotage, their claims will collapse entirely. This forces them onto the defensive, giving us control of the narrative. Michael trusted David implicitly, agreeing with his approach. The strategy was set, awaiting Peak Tech's next move. Days later, Michael's vigilance was rewarded. An urgent message arrived from the City Council in Everett, Washington, the test pilot city for Nexa Bridge. Councilwoman Laura Bennett, an early and enthusiastic supporter of Michael's technology, sounded distressed on the phone. Michael, we just received official notice from Peak Tech's attorneys. They're threatening legal action if Everett proceeds with your pilot. They claim Nexa Bridge infringes on their intellectual property. The council is nervous, Michael. They're considering pulling out entirely. Michael's heart sank, recognizing Henry's ruthless tactic. Peak Tech knew exactly where to apply pressure. Frightening away early adopters could derail Nexa Bridge's momentum before it truly began. Gathering his composure quickly, Michael spoke calmly but urgently. Councilwoman Bennett, I understand your concern, but I assure you Peak Tech's claims are unfounded. If Everett backs down now, Peak Tech wins by default. My attorney can immediately present evidence refuting their accusations clearly and convincingly. We're ready to defend Everett against any threats Peak Tech makes. There was silence on the other end, punctuated only by Laura's thoughtful sigh. Michael, personally I trust you. But the council needs more than assurances. They need legal certainty. Can you provide something concrete? Michael felt determination rising. Absolutely. Let me schedule a meeting immediately with our legal team. Everett deserves clarity, and I'll deliver exactly that. The meeting was hastily arranged for the following day, held via video conference. Michael, alongside David Harding, presented clearly and compellingly. Using Emma's documents cautiously but effectively, they systematically dismantled Peak Tech's accusations, demonstrating their falsity and underlying personal motivations. By the meeting's end, the City Council seemed reassured, though their final decision remained pending internal discussion. The situation escalated further 2 days later when a leading tech industry podcast requested Michael's participation in a live debate with a Peak Tech representative. Recognizing the immense public relations risk but also sensing a unique opportunity, Michael accepted confidently, fully prepared to defend Nexa Bridge publicly and transparently. The debate aired live, attracting thousands of viewers from the tech community nationwide. Michael appeared calm, professional, and articulate, skillfully countering every accusation Peak Tech's attorney attempted to level against him. When Michael finally revealed Emma's damning internal documents, carefully redacted but clearly incriminating, public reaction exploded, overwhelming the broadcast's social media channels with support for Michael and outrage against Peak Tech. Within hours, Peak Tech faced mounting pressure, their credibility severely damaged. News outlets nationwide picked up the story, framing it as a clear case of corporate bullying and ethics violations. Henry Whitfield, once comfortably powerful, now found himself in an increasingly precarious position. Yet, despite the immense public support and temporary victory, Michael felt far from triumphant. The emotional toll was immense. The ongoing stress seeped deeply into his personal life. At home, Mia watched her father struggle through exhaustion and anxiety, unable to hide her own growing worry. Their once calm evenings were replaced by tense silences, broken occasionally by Mia's quiet reassurances. One evening, Mia quietly approached her father, a mixture of innocence and wisdom beyond her years in her eyes. "Dad, you're strong, but you're not alone, remember?" Michael, deeply touched, hugged her tightly, finding renewed strength in her simple truth. "You're right, Mia. I needed that reminder." Late that night, reflecting deeply, Michael understood clearly how much this fight had evolved beyond personal ambition. It had become about principle, integrity, and the broader implications of corporate accountability. Nexa Bridge was no longer just technology. It symbolized resistance against abuse of power, standing for every innovator silenced by fear or intimidation. Despite exhaustion and uncertainty, Michael's resolve remained firm. Henry's attempts at suppression had failed spectacularly, unintentionally amplifying Nexabridge's mission beyond anything Michael had initially imagined. The storm wasn't over, not by far, but Michael was ready, unwaveringly committed to seeing this fight through to its final, inevitable confrontation. Henry Whitfield had underestimated him gravely. Now Michael was determined to ensure that Henry paid dearly for that mistake. Michael had weathered storms before, but none quite like this. As PeakTech struggled to recover from public backlash, Henry Whitfield became increasingly erratic. Under immense pressure from his board and shareholders, Henry was cornered, his carefully crafted corporate persona fraying at the edges. Rather than retreat, Henry decided to double down, his desperation pushing him toward increasingly drastic measures. One gray Monday morning, Michael woke to find his phone flooded with urgent messages. Overnight, PeakTech had escalated dramatically. They'd filed a new lawsuit, not just against Nexabridge, but against Michael personally, accusing him of industrial espionage, theft of trade secrets, and intentional sabotage of PeakTech's reputation. The language of the complaint was sensational, obviously designed to damage Michael's credibility and shake investor confidence. The news jolted Michael from exhaustion into immediate action. He called David Harding urgently, feeling his pulse quicken as David confirmed the gravity of the situation. "Michael, this new suit isn't just legal harassment. It's a direct character assassination. They're banking on the sensational allegations alone to scare investors away." Michael's jaw tightened, his voice steady despite mounting anger. "How credible are these accusations legally?" David responded firmly, yet cautiously. "Honestly, they hold almost no real substance, but they don't need substance to cause damage. Their goal is reputational harm. Winning in court isn't their immediate objective. Frightening your investors and delaying your progress is." Michael's frustration mounted, realizing clearly the ruthless strategy at play. "Then we counter aggressively. Enough defensive posturing. Let's expose them fully, openly and publicly. PeakTech and Henry need to face consequences for these tactics." David's voice hardened with resolve. "I agree. It's time to bring everything to light. Every document, every email, every piece of evidence that reveals PeakTech's manipulation. We'll file countersuits for defamation, malicious prosecution, and intentional interference with your business." Michael felt a surge of fierce determination. "Do it, immediately." Within days, the counteraction from Michael's legal team hit the headlines powerfully. David's filings were explosive, meticulously detailed, revealing PeakTech's internal manipulations explicitly. Emma's carefully obtained documents were fully unveiled now, exposing Henry Whitfield's explicit motivations, clearly proving Nexabridge was cancelled due to personal insecurity and corporate politics, rather than any legitimate strategic concern. The tech industry erupted into heated debate. PeakTech's reputation, already teetering precariously, took severe damage. Investors grew increasingly wary, shareholders demanded explanations, and Henry faced escalating pressure internally and externally. Public opinion shifted powerfully in Michael's favor, painting him as a symbol of integrity and courage in the face of blatant corporate abuse. Yet amid this turbulence, Michael faced escalating personal challenges. The relentless stress began affecting his health, sleep deprivation causing headaches, anxiety, and visible fatigue. Even Mia's cheerful optimism struggled against the oppressive weight of her father's battles. One evening, exhausted and overwhelmed, Michael received another unexpected call. Robert Daniels, his trusted mentor and steadfast supporter, sounding unusually concerned. "Michael, we need to talk face-to-face immediately," Robert said urgently. "Can you meet me tonight?" Anxiety rising again, Michael agreed, meeting Robert in his quiet Palo Alto home. The older man, usually strong and reassuring, appeared unusually solemn, indicating the seriousness of what was to come. "Michael," Robert began gravely, "you're facing an existential threat now. PeakTech won't stop at lawsuits or reputation hits. There's talk behind the scenes. Henry's desperate enough to sabotage Nexabridge physically, hacking, theft, whatever it takes." Michael stiffened sharply, his voice tinged with disbelief and dread. "Are you sure? That would be criminal. Outright sabotage." Robert leaned forward, his voice low but deadly serious. "Henry's panicked, cornered. Don't underestimate how far desperate people can go. You need to secure everything immediately. Servers, data, physical spaces. And honestly, you need personal security now too. This fight has moved far beyond corporate rivalry." Michael felt a profound chill at Robert's words, the reality of how dangerous this situation had become now fully sinking in. He left Robert's home that evening shaken but alert, determined to protect everything he'd built at all costs. The next morning, Michael moved swiftly. He hired cybersecurity experts immediately, fortifying Nexabridge's digital infrastructure comprehensively. Security cameras, alarms, and guards soon secured his workspace and home. Mia, sensing tension despite his attempts at calm reassurance, grew increasingly quiet, her eyes betraying anxiety she was too young to fully articulate. Despite his protective measures, Michael's fears proved justified. Within a week, Nexabridge's servers faced a relentless cyber attack, sophisticated and aggressive. Thankfully, Michael's precautions paid off. The attack was thwarted decisively, traced back meticulously to a shadowy contractor linked indirectly but undeniably to PeakTech. David Harding presented this new evidence forcefully in court, prompting a judge to order immediate investigations into PeakTech's practices, dramatically escalating the crisis. Henry Whitfield, publicly confronted, faced intense questioning from investigators, shareholders, and media alike, his carefully built reputation shattering spectacularly under the mounting evidence. In the public eye, Michael's courage earned widespread admiration. Clearview Capital, undeterred by PeakTech's intimidation tactics, publicly reaffirmed their support, committing substantial resources to accelerate Nexabridge's launch. However, success carried new, unexpected burdens. Michael, increasingly overwhelmed by constant public attention, relentless legal battles, and personal threats, found himself pushed nearly to his breaking point. His carefully maintained composure cracked one evening at home, the weight of his struggles overwhelming. Sitting quietly in his living room, head in his hands, Michael's shoulders shook slightly, exhaustion overtaking his usual strength. Mia, entering silently, noticed immediately. Without a word, she approached gently, hugging him tightly, her youthful strength surprisingly comforting. "Dad," she whispered softly, "you don't always have to be so strong alone. Let people help you." Michael, deeply moved, hugged her tightly, realizing clearly how much he'd neglected his own emotional health in this relentless battle. Mia's innocent wisdom cut through his defenses, prompting him to finally reach out honestly for emotional support from friends and allies he'd inadvertently distanced through pride and stubbornness. Over the next days, buoyed by renewed emotional resilience, Michael decisively took back control of his personal narrative. He spoke openly in interviews, candidly addressing the emotional toll and resilience needed to confront powerful corporate interests. His vulnerability resonated profoundly, sparking wider conversations about the ethics of innovation, corporate accountability, and emotional health in entrepreneurial culture. The narrative around Michael transformed, from mere tech entrepreneur to an advocate for transparency, ethical leadership, and emotional resilience in business. Nexabridge became symbolic of far more than technological advancement. It embodied integrity, courage, and hope in the face of ruthless corporate manipulation. Meanwhile, investigations intensified against PeakTech, exposing further scandals internally. Henry Whitfield, increasingly isolated, faced inevitable downfall. The damage to PeakTech was catastrophic. Stocks plummeted, shareholders rebelled, and internal governance fractured dramatically. The board, recognizing the disastrous direction Henry had led them, swiftly removed him from leadership, issuing a public apology acknowledging their mismanagement of the Nexabridge situation. Yet, Michael felt little triumph at Henry's demise, only profound relief mixed with exhaustion. The fight had exacted heavy personal and emotional costs, forever changing him profoundly. However, he knew clearly he'd done the right thing, holding powerful interests accountable despite enormous risks. In quiet reflection one evening, Michael understood his struggle had been deeply transformative, not just personally, but culturally. He'd drawn a clear line in the sand, refusing compromise in the face of corruption, setting a precedent for integrity in an industry desperately needing such leadership. Though battered and weary, Michael stood firm, stronger than ever. Nexabridge, forged in fire, now symbolized far more than technology. It was now synonymous with courage, accountability, and authentic innovation. Michael Hayes had faced the storm and emerged profoundly changed, yet undeniably victorious. The battle had been brutal, the price immense, but he'd secured a legacy of true integrity, shaping the future profoundly and irrevocably. In the aftermath of Henry Whitfield's fall from grace, PeakTech found itself plunged into an unprecedented crisis. Internal turmoil rocked the corporation as board members scrambled to manage reputational damage, legal repercussions, and mounting shareholder fury. Henry, who had once commanded authority with unshakable confidence, now found himself ousted, humiliated, and stripped of the power he'd obsessively cultivated. However, even in disgrace, Henry's bitterness burned fiercely, making him dangerously unpredictable. Meanwhile, Michael found himself navigating unfamiliar terrain. Nexabridge, buoyed by massive public support and robust financial backing from Clearview Capital, rapidly advanced toward its official launch. The pilot project in Everett, Washington, resumed with renewed vigor, the city council now fully embracing the innovative energy management system as a symbol of progressive leadership. Michael's days transformed into an intense blend of technical oversight, strategic management, and ongoing media appearances. His narrative became a potent symbol of perseverance, ethics, and innovation, a sharp rebuke against corporate abuse. Requests poured in from national news networks, tech podcasts, and even business schools seeking insights into his remarkable journey. Yet despite public acclaim, Michael remained deeply unsettled. Henry's actions, especially the cyber attack, underscored the dangerous lengths to which desperate opponents could go. Anxiety lingered, intensified by occasional anonymous threats still arriving quietly but insistently, reminding Michael the struggle wasn't entirely over. Michael's unease wasn't unfounded. One rainy Thursday evening, returning late from a Nexabridge event downtown, he discovered something deeply alarming. Approaching his home, Michael noticed an unfamiliar vehicle parked near his driveway, a dark sedan idling suspiciously. As he slowed his car cautiously, the sedan abruptly sped away, headlights off, disappearing swiftly down the slick street. Michael's pulse quickened with fear and anger. Instantly he checked on Mia, who was safe inside, blissfully unaware. But the encounter rattled him profoundly, reminding him once again of Robert Daniels' earlier warnings. Desperation could provoke dangerous actions. Deeply unsettled, Michael contacted local authorities immediately, describing the vehicle and circumstances meticulously. Investigators agreed the incident warranted vigilance, advising Michael to further increase personal security measures at his home and workspace, precautions he swiftly implemented without hesitation. Days passed, tension lingering persistently beneath Michael's carefully maintained outward calmness. Nexabridge's launch was scheduled in just 2 weeks, an event attracting significant attention, with confirmed attendance from key tech industry leaders, city officials, and influential media. Security preparations intensified further, reflecting Michael's deepening anxiety regarding potential sabotage or further threats. Michael's fears were not unfounded. Just days before the launch event, he received a frantic late-night call from Emma Thompson, her voice shaking with urgency and fear. "Michael," she gasped breathlessly, clearly distressed. "Henry reached out privately. He's unhinged, desperate. He blames you personally for everything, his firing, his disgrace. I think he's planning something drastic." Michael's heart froze momentarily, dread overwhelming him. Did he say anything specific? Emma struggled to maintain composure, speaking rapidly yet clearly. "He kept rambling, something about making sure your success doesn't go unanswered. He sounded dangerous, Michael, like someone pushed past reason." Michael took a deep breath, steadying himself despite his surging panic. "Emma, you have to contact the police immediately. Report exactly what he said. I'll do the same here. We can't take any chances. Not anymore." Emma agreed quickly, promising swift action. Yet as Michael hung up, fear intensified. Henry Whitfield, once merely manipulative and ambitious, now appeared genuinely unstable, capable of anything. The threat was no longer abstract. It was imminent and personal. Local police increased their surveillance around Michael's property and Nexabridge's offices significantly. Security professionals, already vigilant, tightened procedures even further, screening visitors meticulously and increasing monitoring of physical and digital spaces. Despite these heightened measures, Michael's anxiety remained intense, his sleep disrupted nightly by restless vigilance and ongoing worry for Mia's safety. The eve of Nexabridge's launch finally arrived, an evening Michael had envisioned as a moment of triumph, now overshadowed by apprehension and fear. Late that night, reviewing final preparations meticulously, Michael received an unexpected visitor at his office, Robert Daniels, appearing unusually somber yet reassuringly steady. "Michael, tomorrow is a milestone, and you deserve it," Robert said softly, taking a seat nearby. "But we both know threats still linger. Henry might try something tomorrow, something reckless and desperate." Michael nodded slowly, weariness and determination mingling in his expression. "Robert, at this point I don't know if I'm paranoid or realistic, but I'm prepared. Security's tighter than ever. If Henry tries anything, we'll be ready." Robert nodded, yet his expression remained cautious. "Michael, men like Henry don't think logically when cornered. His actions might defy predictability or caution. Be vigilant tomorrow, especially regarding your daughter. Mia's your greatest vulnerability." Michael's chest tightened sharply, his heart aching at the thought. "I've arranged extra protection for her. She'll be safe at home tomorrow, guarded carefully. Nothing matters more." Robert squeezed Michael's shoulder reassuringly. Good. Now try to rest tonight. You'll need your strength tomorrow. Sleep proved elusive, but morning eventually broke, clear and bright, despite Michael's heavy heart and restless mind. Preparations proceeded smoothly at Everett City Hall, where Nexabridge's launch event would occur. Security personnel swarmed discreetly, scanning carefully for potential threats among arriving guests. The event began flawlessly, with speakers praising Michael's courage, innovation, and ethical leadership. The audience responded enthusiastically, inspired by Nexabridge's remarkable journey. Michael, despite ongoing anxiety, managed to maintain composure, delivering a heartfelt, powerful speech emphasizing resilience, integrity, and innovation's transformative power. Yet beneath the facade of normalcy, Michael's nerves remained tense, sensing danger persistently. Then, midway through the event, Michael's phone buzzed urgently. Security at home was calling. "Mr. Hayes," the guard spoke sharply, urgently. "We've detained an intruder attempting entry through a back door." The individual resisted violently, ranting incoherently. "Police have arrived. They believe he's Henry Whitfield." Michael's knees weakened momentarily, fear and relief battling intensely within him. "Is Mia safe?" he asked desperately. "Yes, sir. She's secure, completely unharmed. She never saw or heard anything." Profound relief surged through Michael, tears stinging his eyes briefly. Authorities swiftly took Henry into custody, charging him with trespassing, attempted burglary, and criminal threats. Investigators confirmed Henry's motives. His attempt had been to frighten Michael into canceling Nexabridge's launch, driven by obsessive resentment and desperation. Word spread rapidly among attendees, initially causing alarm, but swiftly transforming into admiration and respect for Michael's courage and resilience. Media coverage intensified, amplifying public condemnation of Henry's criminal behavior, ensuring PeakTech's ongoing reputational collapse deepened further, effectively ending any remaining credibility they possessed. That evening, safely home with Mia secure beside him, Michael finally allowed himself genuine emotional release. Gratitude, relief, exhaustion, and triumph mixing deeply. Mia hugged him tightly, her innocence comforting profoundly. "Dad," she whispered softly, sensing his relief deeply. "I told you everything would be okay." Michael smiled warmly, deeply moved, understanding clearly how profoundly his battle had reshaped him, strengthening resolve, clarifying priorities, and solidifying his commitment to integrity and authentic leadership. Nexabridge's launch became more than technological. It represented triumph over fear, intimidation, and corruption, embodying resilience and courage profoundly inspiring nationwide. Michael's struggle reshaped conversations about corporate ethics, innovation, and emotional resilience, fundamentally altering how businesses approached accountability and transparency. Henry Whitfield, once powerful and respected, now faced criminal charges, his legacy irreversibly tarnished. PeakTech, severely damaged, faced massive restructuring amid public condemnation. Yet for Michael Hayes, victory was bittersweet, achieved at great personal cost, profoundly changing him forever. He emerged stronger, wiser, and resolute, committed deeply to values tested fiercely. Though the battle ended decisively, Michael knew clearly his journey toward true leadership and innovation was only beginning, shaped profoundly by lessons learned through profound struggle, resilience, and sacrifice. In the weeks following the dramatic and nearly tragic launch event, Michael Hayes found himself thrust into a profoundly unfamiliar reality. Success had finally arrived in undeniable fashion, but at a cost he'd never anticipated. His name, once known only within narrow professional circles, now echoed across Silicon Valley and beyond, synonymous not just with innovation, but also integrity, resilience, and courage in the face of ruthless corporate hostility. Henry Whitfield's desperate attempt to threaten Michael's family had backfired spectacularly. Arrested and facing severe charges, Henry now occupied a jail cell awaiting trial, his career and reputation utterly destroyed. PeakTech, once a corporate titan revered and envied, had become a cautionary tale in corporate governance classes and business schools across the nation. Its stock price plummeted, its leadership purged and replaced, and the once proud company struggled under crippling reputational damage and internal chaos. Despite clear victory, Michael found no joy in Henry's downfall. Instead, he experienced only quiet relief mixed with exhaustion. The battle, now over, had stripped away layers of idealism and innocence he hadn't even realized he'd held. Though he'd survived physically and professionally, Michael felt forever changed emotionally and psychologically by the intensity of his experiences. The trauma of nearly losing Mia lingered deeply, changing him profoundly and permanently. Nexabridge, however, soared. The successful launch and public embrace of his innovative technology quickly attracted powerful allies and enthusiastic customers across America and abroad. Cities nationwide clamored for demonstrations, eager to adopt the revolutionary smart grid system that promised extraordinary energy efficiency, dramatic cost savings, and powerful environmental benefits. Investors, sensing immense potential, approached Michael eagerly, offering resources and collaboration. Nexabridge was transforming rapidly from promising startup to influential industry leader. Yet, Michael remained profoundly cautious, acutely aware of how success and visibility attracted not only allies but potential adversaries and threats. Heightened security continued at home and work, now standard precautions born from bitter lessons rather than mere caution. Emotionally, Michael struggled profoundly despite professional triumph. The intensity of the ordeal had profoundly impacted his mental and emotional health. He suffered recurring nightmares, haunted by visions of threats against Mia, fearful scenarios replaying repeatedly in vivid, exhausting detail. Sleep became elusive, anxiety pervasive, disrupting even moments of quiet or relaxation. Realizing clearly that professional resilience required personal healing, Michael finally sought professional help, attending therapy sessions privately, confronting emotional scars inflicted during his traumatic experiences. These sessions proved immensely challenging yet cathartic, helping Michael slowly regain emotional equilibrium and internal strength. Through therapy, Michael also grappled deeply with lingering guilt, irrational yet persistent, over exposing Mia, even indirectly, to danger. Addressing this, confronting vulnerabilities honestly, helped Michael gradually heal emotionally, reinforcing lessons of humility, compassion, and self-care he'd previously neglected amid professional struggles. Meanwhile, Mia's strength profoundly inspired Michael. Despite experiencing unsettling events indirectly, Mia exhibited remarkable emotional resilience, understanding intuitively the depth of her father's struggle. Her quiet maturity and reassuring presence provided Michael profound comfort, an anchor grounding him firmly amid turbulent emotional recovery. During this challenging yet transformative period, Robert Daniels emerged again as Michael's unwavering friend and mentor. Understanding deeply the emotional toll Michael experienced, Robert frequently invited Michael and Mia to his quiet retreat outside Palo Alto, a tranquil, secluded ranch surrounded by peaceful hills, lush orchards, and calming landscapes. There, away from relentless media attention and professional pressures, Michael found crucial respite, reconnecting quietly with himself emotionally and spiritually. Robert provided wise, compassionate counsel, reinforcing essential truths Michael desperately needed to hear. Michael, Robert often gently reminded him during long conversations beneath starlit skies. You've won the external battle decisively, but true victory means reclaiming your inner peace, nurturing yourself emotionally, spiritually, and personally, not just professionally. Michael gradually absorbed Robert's wisdom deeply, internalizing these essential truths profoundly. Slowly, painfully but decisively, he began reconstructing emotional foundations battered severely during prolonged battles against corporate hostility and personal threats. Back at Nexabridge, Michael consciously reshaped company culture fundamentally, emphasizing values explicitly reflecting lessons learned through his own intense struggles. Integrity, transparency, emotional intelligence, and ethical leadership became cornerstones shaping Nexabridge profoundly, attracting exceptional talent inspired deeply by Michael's leadership example. Emma Thompson, whose courageous actions had proved crucial during Michael's struggles, ultimately left PeakTech, joining Nexabridge enthusiastically as Chief Operating Officer. Emma's exceptional strategic insight, courage under pressure, and ethical clarity immediately strengthened Nexabridge profoundly. Michael trusted Emma implicitly, deeply valuing her clear-eyed pragmatism balanced beautifully by profound compassion and integrity. Together, Michael and Emma consciously created at Nexabridge a culture powerfully embodying lessons learned deeply and painfully through recent struggles. Open communication, psychological safety, ethical clarity, and compassionate leadership shaped Nexabridge profoundly, attracting loyal, deeply motivated employees committed passionately to a company reflecting their own highest values and ideals. Months passed steadily, professional and emotional healing progressing slowly yet decisively. Media attention gradually receded, intense scrutiny fading slightly, replaced by quieter, steadier interest in Nexabridge's tangible achievements rather than sensational battles. Michael gradually reclaimed quieter normalcy, cautiously optimistic yet profoundly changed by experiences endured deeply. Then, nearly 1 year after Nexabridge's tumultuous launch, Michael received news of Henry Whitfield's sentencing, a 5-year prison term reflecting Henry's destructive actions, criminal intent, and complete lack of remorse. Hearing this, Michael experienced quiet sadness rather than triumph. understanding deeply the human tragedy beneath Henry's disgrace, profoundly aware how bitterness, insecurity, and ruthless ambition ultimately destroyed Henry himself. That evening, reflecting deeply at home, Michael gently shared news of Henry's sentencing with Mia. Mia, now wiser beyond her years, listened quietly, absorbing thoughtfully her father's gentle explanations of forgiveness, accountability, and human frailty. "Dad?" Mia asked gently afterward, thoughtful eyes gazing earnestly upward. "Do you forgive him?" Michael considered quietly, deeply touched by Mia's simple yet profound question. He responded slowly, honestly. "Forgiveness isn't easy, Mia, but holding bitterness hurts us most of all. I can't forget Henry's actions, but I forgive his humanity, his weakness, his fear." Mia nodded softly, sensing instinctively her father's emotional truth profoundly. "Dad," she continued gently, her voice steady and deeply sincere, "I'm really proud of you, not just for everything you did at work, but because you stayed good inside, even when things got really bad." Michael's heart swelled profoundly, emotions rising powerfully, tears stinging slightly. He hugged Mia tightly, understanding clearly that despite professional success, personal integrity mattered far more deeply. Mia's simple, profound validation moved him more profoundly than any professional recognition or acclaim ever could. Quietly, after Mia slept peacefully that night, Michael reflected deeply. Professional success, though satisfying, paled compared to profound personal transformations he'd experienced emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. Integrity, courage, humility, and compassion, once abstract concepts, had become vivid, essential realities shaping him profoundly. Michael realized clearly that Nexabridge, though immensely valuable professionally, ultimately served merely as a catalyst profoundly transforming him internally. True victory wasn't external accolades, wealth, or influence. It was emotional authenticity, spiritual integrity, personal resilience, and compassionate leadership profoundly impacting others positively. Michael Hayes had begun his journey as a gifted engineer battling corporate injustice, but ultimately, he'd emerged profoundly transformed into an inspiring leader, deeply committed to ethical values forged intensely through profound struggle and sacrifice. He understood now that true innovation transcended technology profoundly. It meant courageously reshaping oneself emotionally, spiritually, ethically, and personally. Nexabridge had revolutionized industries, but Michael had revolutionized himself profoundly, reclaiming emotional truth, spiritual resilience, and authentic leadership more valuable than any technology. Michael's journey wasn't finished, far from it, but he'd reclaimed essential inner peace, emotional resilience, and personal integrity profoundly. These gifts, forged through intense personal struggle, ultimately became Michael's greatest legacy, impacting deeply every person, employee, and partner he encountered. Michael Hayes, quietly yet decisively, had truly triumphed, not merely professionally, but emotionally, spiritually, and personally. His legacy wasn't merely Nexabridge, it was himself profoundly transformed, inspiring profoundly authentic leadership for generations to come. 2 years had passed since Nexabridge's launch, and the world Michael Hayes inhabited had transformed significantly. Nexabridge, now firmly established as a leader in smart city innovation, had revolutionized urban energy management in dozens of major cities worldwide. Michael, once an engineer quietly crafting revolutionary ideas behind closed doors, had evolved into an influential figure recognized for his ethical leadership, visionary innovation, and personal resilience in the face of extraordinary adversity. Yet success had not diluted Michael's humility. He remained grounded by memories of past struggles and guided profoundly by values forged in crisis: integrity, courage, transparency, and compassion. He never forgot the profound human costs paid during his confrontation with Peak Tech, nor did he allow professional acclaim to obscure essential truths learned in painful battles. Still, reminders of the past occasionally resurfaced, sometimes gently, other times harshly. One quiet morning, Michael received an unexpected call, a voice he had not heard in years but recognized instantly. It belonged to Samuel Baker, the former Peak Tech engineer whose careless gossip had unintentionally fueled Henry Whitfield's vendetta. "Michael," Samuel began hesitantly, his voice tinged with uncertainty and shame. "I know it's been a long time. I didn't expect you to answer, honestly." Michael paused briefly, a rush of emotions briefly clouding his thoughts. He composed himself quickly, responding calmly. "Samuel, I admit I didn't expect your call. How have you been?" Samuel sighed deeply, remorse heavy in his voice. "Honestly, Michael, not well. After everything happened at Peak Tech, I couldn't stop thinking about how my actions helped trigger so much harm. I wanted to apologize to you personally, even though it's long overdue. My carelessness contributed to pain that I never intended. I regret it deeply. Michael felt empathy rather than resentment. Over time, he'd realized Samuel was not malicious, merely thoughtless, unaware how severely his casual gossip would ripple destructively outward. Samuel's sincere remorse deserved genuine compassion, not bitterness. I appreciate you reaching out, Samuel, Michael responded gently, sincerity evident in his tone. I forgave you a long time ago. What happened taught us all painful lessons. I'm grateful you found the courage to acknowledge it now. Samuel's relief was palpable. Thank you, Michael. Honestly, it means more than you know. I've learned a lot from watching you handle everything. You taught us something crucial about integrity, even when things were hardest. Their conversation ended warmly, leaving Michael reflective yet reassured. Samuel's remorse reminded him again of humanity's complexity, vulnerability, and capacity for growth. Forgiveness wasn't merely noble. It was necessary for genuine healing, both personally and communally. Michael's reflection deepened further one afternoon, months later, when news unexpectedly reached him from Henry Whitfield's family. Henry, once the embodiment of ruthless ambition and manipulation, had passed away suddenly in prison, victim of a heart attack. The news jarred Michael profoundly, not because he mourned Henry, but because he profoundly understood the tragic waste of Henry's life. That evening, quietly reflecting at home, Michael shared the news gently with Mia, now a teenager possessing maturity beyond her years. Mia listened carefully, thoughtful and compassionate. Dad, she began gently afterward, her eyes earnest and questioning. Do you feel sad about Henry? Michael considered deeply, speaking slowly, honestly. I feel sadness, but not exactly for Henry himself. I feel sad because his life could have meant something positive. Instead, anger, fear, and bitterness consumed him. He could have chosen differently. Mia nodded solemnly, understanding deeply her father's emotional honesty. She responded quietly yet wisely. Maybe his mistakes taught everyone else something important. Michael smiled softly, profoundly touched again by Mia's innocent yet deeply perceptive wisdom. Yes, Mia, maybe that's the best we can hope, learning from our own pain and from others, even if they never learned themselves. The following days saw Michael contacted repeatedly by media outlets eager for comment regarding Henry's passing. Michael responded publicly, carefully, thoughtfully, emphasizing compassion, reflection, and broader lessons learned deeply through intense personal struggles. In one widely quoted interview, Michael expressed himself profoundly. Henry Whitfield's story teaches us more than condemnation or bitterness ever could. His life and tragic choices show clearly how ambition without compassion, power without integrity, and success without humility ultimately lead to ruin, not only personally, but professionally and socially. We honor ourselves and others best by learning deeply from these painful truths. His response resonated powerfully, prompting widespread reflection about ethical leadership, corporate accountability, and human vulnerability beneath professional facades. Michael's thoughtful insights sparked important conversations nationwide, reinforcing Nexabridge's reputation not just for technological innovation, but for deeply ethical, compassionate leadership, profoundly shaping corporate cultures far beyond Silicon Valley. In the quiet months afterward, Michael continued building Nexabridge thoughtfully, expanding innovations into new sectors, transportation, infrastructure management, sustainable urban planning, always guided profoundly by integrity, compassion, and lessons forged deeply through past struggles. The company's headquarters, once modest and sparse, grew into a vibrant hub of creative talent inspired profoundly by Michael's leadership example. Emma Thompson remained his steadfast partner professionally, consistently demonstrating remarkable strategic insight and unwavering ethical clarity. Together, their complementary strengths profoundly shaped Nexabridge's culture, attracting brilliant talent deeply committed to innovation, integrity, and compassionate leadership. Yet Michael, despite professional success and widespread acclaim, found deepest fulfillment quietly, personally, watching Mia flourish into a thoughtful, resilient, empathetic young woman, profoundly shaped by values her father embodied authentically and courageously. Mia excelled academically, socially, and creatively, deeply respected by peers and mentors alike, profoundly understanding emotional truths many adults rarely grasped. Quietly, Michael realized clearly his greatest legacy wasn't technological or corporate. It was profoundly human, deeply personal. His ethical courage, emotional resilience, and compassionate leadership shaped Mia profoundly, ensuring she'd carry forward deeply authentic values, profoundly shaping countless others positively. One peaceful evening, Michael sat quietly at home, reviewing Nexabridge's latest expansion plans thoughtfully. Mia, nearby, studied quietly, her concentration intense, posture reflecting quiet strength and emotional maturity. Michael glanced upward briefly, suddenly struck profoundly by deep emotional gratitude. Professional success mattered. Innovation mattered profoundly. But personal authenticity, emotional integrity, compassionate leadership, and authentic relationships mattered infinitely more. Mia, noticing her father's quiet reflection, glanced upward gently, smiling softly. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" Michael responded softly, truthfully. "How lucky I feel, despite everything. Life took us through struggles I never imagined. But we survived, Mia. More than survived. We grew deeply. Pain changed us profoundly. But it taught us essential truths we could never have learned any other way." Mia listened carefully, thoughtful eyes gazing earnestly. She nodded slowly, responding gently. "I think maybe life always does that. Gives us pain sometimes, but then gives us something deeper afterward. Maybe it's the only way we ever truly learn." Michael smiled warmly, profoundly touched again by Mia's emotional maturity. Quietly, they returned to their tasks. Father and daughter profoundly connected by truths shared deeply, authentically, compassionately. Outside, twilight fell gently, stars emerging quietly above peaceful California skies. Michael's journey had taken unexpected, painful, yet profoundly transformative paths, reshaping him emotionally, spiritually, ethically. He'd faced corporate hostility, personal threats, intense trauma. But ultimately, he'd emerged profoundly transformed, reclaiming emotional authenticity, ethical leadership, and profound human connections more valuable than any professional achievement. Nexabridge had indeed changed industries profoundly, but Michael himself had been transformed even more deeply, forging a profoundly authentic legacy impacting countless lives, including Mia's. Quietly, Michael understood clearly. His truest victory wasn't external success, but profound inner transformation. Authentic emotional courage, ethical resilience, compassionate leadership, quietly but powerfully echoing far beyond himself, profoundly, reshaping the future for generations yet to come. 10 years had passed since the fateful day Michael Hayes walked out of PeakTech's offices, determined yet uncertain about his future. In that decade, his journey had taken him further than he'd ever imagined, not merely through the peaks and valleys of entrepreneurial triumph, but through profound personal transformation, emotional resilience, and ethical clarity that reshaped him from within. Michael, now in his early 50s, found himself reflecting often, humbled and grateful by how his experiences had unfolded. Nexabridge had grown spectacularly, becoming not only a technological powerhouse, but also a global standard-bearer for ethical corporate conduct and innovation. Under Michael's leadership, the company had expanded across every continent, its technologies reshaping energy management and urban planning worldwide, driving profound shifts towards sustainability, efficiency, and responsible governance. Yet despite his stature and success, Michael remained characteristically humble, quietly anchored by values forged through intense personal struggles. His leadership style had become legendary, marked by transparency, integrity, compassion, and humility. His frequent keynote addresses, TED Talks, and appearances at influential international forums always carried these themes strongly, impacting deeply the next generation of entrepreneurs, innovators, and corporate leaders. Michael understood profoundly how deeply personal trauma had reshaped him, ultimately transforming him into an influential advocate for mental health awareness in entrepreneurial communities. His open discussions about anxiety, trauma, resilience, and emotional authenticity broke powerful stigmas, encouraging profound shifts in corporate culture globally, promoting empathy, psychological safety, and emotional support as essential leadership values. Mia, now in her early 20s, had grown into a remarkable young woman profoundly shaped by her father's example. Exceptionally talented, emotionally intelligent, and ethically committed, Mia pursued graduate studies at Stanford, specializing in environmental engineering and public policy. Inspired deeply by Michael's legacy, she aspired passionately to combine technical expertise with ethical leadership, reflecting precisely the values Michael had embodied authentically. Father and daughter maintained a deeply close, emotionally profound relationship marked by mutual respect, understanding, and openness. Their conversations, frequent and sincere, often explored themes of resilience, forgiveness, integrity, and compassion, values deeply shaping them both. Mia's clarity, maturity, and authenticity consistently inspired Michael profoundly, reassuring him clearly that the future rested securely in empathetic, emotionally intelligent hands. Emma Thompson, Michael's steadfast partner through every phase of Nexabridge's growth, remained integral professionally and personally. Their friendship had deepened over the years, marked by mutual respect, deep trust, and shared experiences navigating intense struggles. Emma, having taken over day-to-day operations as CEO several years earlier, led Nexabridge confidently, guided profoundly by Michael's ethical framework, yet empowered fully by her own exceptional leadership. One afternoon, Michael and Emma sat quietly in Nexabridge's expansive headquarters, modern, sustainable, thoughtfully designed, reflecting warmly upon their journey together. "Did you ever imagine," Emma asked gently, a soft smile on her lips, "that Nexabridge would become this? Or that we would?" Michael smiled warmly, thoughtfully. "Honestly, Emma, not remotely. Back then I just wanted justice, a fair chance. I never dreamed we'd create something truly lasting, or that our fight would resonate so deeply with so many." Emma nodded slowly, reflective yet resolute. "Your courage changed more than just corporate culture. You changed people, Michael. You gave others permission to fight for integrity, to value emotional health alongside professional ambition. That's your legacy, far beyond technology or success." Michael felt profoundly moved, gratitude filling him deeply. "If that's true, it's because I wasn't alone. Without you, Robert, Mia, even Samuel in his own way, I'd never have survived emotionally or ethically. Our legacy is shared profoundly." Emma smiled quietly, nodding deeply, understanding clearly his sincerity. Their quiet bond, tested intensely yet strengthened powerfully over years, remained an essential emotional anchor grounding Michael profoundly. Months later, Michael received news deeply emotional yet profoundly affirming. Stanford had named him commencement speaker for Mia's graduating class, specifically highlighting his powerful example of ethical leadership, resilience, and innovation. Humbled deeply, Michael accepted gratefully, recognizing clearly this profound symbolic milestone. His journey had now come profoundly full circle. The commencement day dawned bright and clear. Stanford's iconic Memorial Stadium filled with thousands of graduates, families, and distinguished guests. Michael approached the podium thoughtfully, heart swelling with pride. Not merely professional pride, but profound emotional pride in Mia, seated among graduates, her quiet strength profoundly visible. Michael's speech, deeply sincere, powerfully resonant, recounted candidly his profound struggles and triumphs, sharing transparently lessons learned through intense pain and challenge. "Graduates, innovation isn't just technological, it's profoundly emotional, ethical, and personal. True innovation requires integrity, courage, resilience, and authenticity. Values forged intensely through profound struggle and sacrifice. In my darkest moments, when adversity seemed overwhelming, I learned something crucial. Authentic success never comes easily, nor does it exist apart from our humanity. Emotional resilience matters as much as professional competence. Compassion matters as much as ambition. Integrity matters infinitely more than expediency. Remember always, your greatest challenges can become your most profound teachers. Painful experiences, confronted courageously and authentically, shape us profoundly, emotionally, ethically, transforming not merely careers but entire lives and legacies profoundly. My journey wasn't easy, but it taught me clearly, never sacrifice your emotional integrity for temporary success. True victory comes quietly yet powerfully, through emotional courage, ethical clarity, and compassionate leadership. Graduates, as you shape your own paths profoundly, remember always, integrity is your truest currency. Emotional authenticity, your deepest strength. Compassion, your greatest legacy. Be courageous, resilient, and authentic, always. That's true innovation, true leadership, and true success. His speech concluded quietly yet profoundly, met initially by reflective silence, then powerful applause, cheers, standing ovations expressing profoundly how deeply his emotional sincerity, ethical clarity, and powerful authenticity resonated personally among thousands present. Afterward, privately celebrating quietly with Mia, Emma, Robert Daniels, and close friends, Michael understood clearly how profoundly life had reshaped him, emotionally, ethically, spiritually. Success mattered, but personal authenticity mattered infinitely more profoundly. Nexabridge had transformed industries, yes, but Michael himself had been profoundly transformed, reshaped emotionally, ethically, spiritually through intense personal struggle. Quietly, Michael Hayes recognized clearly, His greatest triumph wasn't Nexabridge's corporate success or technological impact. His truest legacy was profoundly personal. Emotional courage, compassionate leadership, ethical resilience, profoundly inspiring generations far beyond his lifetime. In quiet moments afterward, gazing reflectively at Mia, now beginning her own profoundly promising journey, Michael felt profound emotional peace. He'd endured incredible struggles, challenges, and pain, but those intense experiences had shaped him profoundly, emotionally transforming him into an authentic leader whose true legacy transcended corporate achievement profoundly. Michael Hayes, once simply an engineer silenced unjustly, had emerged powerfully yet quietly as an authentic innovator, not just technologically, but profoundly ethically, emotionally, and personally. His journey inspired countless others profoundly, teaching essential truths about resilience, integrity, and compassion through intense personal example. Quietly, thoughtfully, Michael reflected clearly. This was true victory, true legacy, and true innovation. And quietly yet profoundly, he understood clearly. His journey wasn't ending, merely transforming powerfully yet again, shaping profoundly new generations whose authentic leadership would carry forward emotional resilience, ethical clarity, and profound compassion far into the future. Michael Hayes had truly triumphed, not merely professionally, but emotionally, ethically, spiritually, profoundly reshaping lives far beyond himself.